So I thought it might be funny if I eat a green piece of candy and it makes my mouth green while I'm reviewing the book Jade City, but then I realized that I do everything in front of a green screen, so it's possible that my entire mouth looks like an abyss, or you can see through it into the bookshelf, which may be creepier. Let's talk about Jade City by Fonda Lee. Jade City is an urban fantasy that takes place in a world with guns and cars and like modern day conveniences except for cell phones, so probably in the 80s or 90s. The book starts off with a really clear setting of what we're looking at, and that is we're going to be dealing with drug families in a drug war. But unlike the normal setup where we're dealing with that sort of conceit, the like number one rule that they say, which is don't get high in your own supply, well, in this world, the magic system is also based on the drug because the drug is something called Jade. And Jade has the ability to give certain people with certain bloodlines supernatural powers. But if your bloodline sways too far one way or another, the Jade will either not affect you at all, in which case you're called a Stone Eye, or if you come into contact with Jade, it's like a super overdose of drugs and you go crazy and try to kill everybody. Lee does an excellent job at throwing you right into the thick of it right away, and you immediately are exposed to some of the consequences and or rules of this world before you are thrown into a magical version of this crime city thing. Now listen, I've heard a lot of people talk about this book and talk about The Godfather. I've never seen The Godfather. But what I have seen is things like The Fast and the Furious, where you have like these tight family groups that are in some form of organized crime warring against each other. Or my favorite example, which was this game that didn't sell very well, it was called Sleeping Dogs, and it was amazing, and I love it so much. And that game you're dealing with a Chinese triad, but you have a very similar situation here, which is where the city is set up in a way that instead of traditional law enforcement, the gangs are in charge of keeping peace between each other and between regular crime on the streets. But how they choose to do that is kind of up to their own discretion. The territories are mapped out as you might expect in this sort of setting, and we get a lot of political interplay here with why different people own different sections of the city, the way that they choose to maintain their control over certain businesses, which all have to pay tributes to the gangs. But like all organized crime sort of stories, there's a lot of chaos, and more importantly, there is a ridiculous amount of brutality. And because like the law and order is these crime syndicates, it's not that uncommon for there to be like short bursts of extreme violence, and that's just a normal thing for the people. Because the world is so brutal, the families that run these crime organizations, we get to spend time primarily with one specific family. The individual members here experience loss and trauma. They're not very well adjusted, and they have very peculiar senses of morality. This is going to be a sort of story where you don't have a traditional hero. There's a lot of moral grayness going on, and thus where these families may have something like family loyalty, they may lack significant moral fibers in lots of other areas. And the way that Fonda Lee writes them is that they are extremely easy to empathize with on one level, but because they are such flawed characters, they tend to make very ill-advised decisions fairly frequently, which leads to a lot of high-stakes moments in the story and a lot of entertainment for the reader. Those stakes and the politics involved in trying to manipulate them and capitalize on them is the primary driving force when reading this story. If that's the sort of thing that sounds interesting, this is probably for you. While guns exist in this world, it is a fantasy story where there is magic that basically enhances different physical attributes of the users. There's a lot of martial arts and hand-to-hand like melee weapon combat. Personally, one of the things I wish I could have seen more in this story would have been more weapons combat, because I don't read a lot of fantasy with guns, and your gangster stories I feel like should involve more like, hey, running up on a place and shooting it up. There's reasons in the story for it not to happen. There's also instances in the story where it's supposed to happen, but I feel like if you're gonna have a fantasy story with guns, I want to see more uses of those guns. Though there are ways that the magic system helps alleviate guns just being the most powerful weapon they should be in a story where they exist. Fonda Lee is an experienced martial artist herself, so the action scenes are well written, and they are brutal, and there are always significant consequences to every conflict of interest that comes to blows. And both the events leading up to conflict as well as the aftermath of conflicts are always exceedingly momentous events that have far-reaching, sometimes unforeseen effects. And I guess that's the thing that I really love about this. We get to dive into the heads of these set of primary characters in this one family. We get to know their flaws, their drives, their motivations, and thus we can identify with their losses and why they strategize the way that they do versus the way that the enemies do. And even though they often make bad decisions that end in extreme amounts of violence, we can still identify with the humanity of these characters since we spend time in their heads. They live in an extremely rough world, but it is an entertaining ride, I will say again. This book ends on a satisfying note, though it also leaves lots of obvious hooks for where the next book, Jade War, could be headed, and I am excited to continue this series next month. I will be buddy reading Jade War with Murphy Napier. You can check out her channel down below, and we will be doing a big spoiler-filled discussion over on her channel in December. I just want to throw out there, if anything I've said about this story sounds interesting, you should probably pick it up. It's a very good read. Have you read Jade City? Please comment down below with your thoughts on it. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos from me, please remember to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell to get notifications when I post other videos. If you'd like to chat with me more in depth, there is a link down below to my Discord server, which is available to everybody. And if you'd like to help out financially, there's links down below for both a Patreon and a merch store where you can get ridiculous shirts that I've made like this one. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.
No one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep. No one ever get enough. If it don't show up, I might get fired. Sleep. No one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep. No one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired.